This video was brought to you by my patrons. Thanks!
Content warning for graphic imagery and some body horror. Also, Pacific Rim and its sequel both chose to use a Romani slur in the name of the main Jaeger for both films. Yes, even though it's spelled with an I, it's still based on a word that is considered a slur to Romani people. I'm going to avoid saying it, and instead we'll be referring to those Jaegers as Lady Danger and Lady Avenger, which were common fan substitutions for those who were more aware than me at the time of the original film's release and its sequel. The actual names might still show up on screen or in dialogue from time to time, so just be prepared for that. And spoiler alert for Pacific Rim Uprising, and Pacific Rim The Black. And here's your regular reminder that art is subjective, so please be chill, kids. Pacific Rim is the strangest franchise that your weird friend wouldn't shut up about from 2013 to 2014, and then again in 2018, and now, in the year of our Lord 2021, I won't shut up about it. It's had a strange regenerating half-life, from a love letter to Japanese media by a Mexican director, to a highly controversial sequel that still managed to do better with John Boyega than Star Wars did, and now an animated series produced for Netflix by some Marvel Comics writers. And that's not even getting into the fan base for this franchise, which was so committed, they even spawned a real band based on a fanfiction. And aside from Rogue One, this is probably one of the pieces of media I have spent the most time hyperfixating on. So let's talk about that.
Let's take care of the drones, right? Mike.
The first Pacific Rim had a somewhat interesting development process. It actually began when writer Travis Beacham and director Guillermo del Toro were developing a project called Killing on Carnival Row in 2006. It never got off the ground in that iteration, but it eventually became the Amazon series Carnival Row starring Cara Delevingne and Orlando Bloom. Now, the concept for Pacific Rim began with Beacham. He says the idea hit him one day in 2007 walking down the Santa Monica Pier. He looked up and pictured a fight between a giant monster and a giant robot. In 2010, Legendary Pictures purchased the rights based on an 18-page illustrated treatment, and the project was titled Pacific Rim. At the time, Del Toro was working on producing his H.P. Lovecraft adaptation of In the Mountains of Madness. Unfortunately, that was another project that would never end up seeing the light of day, but during meetings with Legendary Pictures, he saw Beacham's treatment and found it intriguing. Now, Travis Beacham's filmography is a bit small. Pacific Rim, The Clash of the Titans, the aforementioned Carnival Row, and one episode of that Amazon series Electric Dreams, and that's about it. And on the other hand, we have director Guillermo del Toro. I'll get to him in a minute. Also, I should mention the music for the film is done by the absolute legend Ramin Djawadi. If you don't know his name, I promise you know his music. He composed for Game of Thrones, Westworld, the first Iron Man, and the main theme from Pacific Rim is so cool it makes me want to go punch cars. So now let's do the rundown. Our two leads in the movie are Charlie Hunnam, playing Raleigh Beckett, and Rinko Kikuchi, playing Mako Mori. Hunnam's probably best known for his role on Sons of Anarchy, although apparently it was a part in Nicholas Nickleby that brought him to Guillermo's attention. And Rinko Kikuchi is just fucking phenomenal. If you aren't familiar with her other work, I beg you to brush up. No matter what the project is, she is always turning up and delivering exactly what is asked of her. In Season 2 of Westworld, she had a 2-episode run as the character Akane, and she did a dance to an instrumental cover of a Wu-Tang Clan song and then sawed a man's head in half, and it ruled. She was heartbreaking in the 2006 film Babel, and she was hilarious in the 2008 classic The Brothers Bloom. She's great in Kumiko the Treasure Hunter, and one of her most recent roles at the time of writing this is a small part in the 2019 Makoto Nagahisa film We Are Little Zombies, which Yara Zaid covered recently on her channel, and it was lovely. Go watch her video. Now, when we want to describe the characters these two play, I would describe Mako Mori as perfect and one of my favorite characters, and Raleigh Beckett as a golden retriever with trauma. So after our two leads, we've got Idris Elba as Stacker Pentecost, being just the coolest and saying really rad shit like this.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
I'm assuming we all know who Idris Elba is from the likes of The Wire, Luther, and Beasts of No Nation, but because I am a monster, I want to remind you that he also did this. Pentecost runs the Hong Kong Shatterdome, where most of the film takes place, and is just generally a badass who says shit like this.
1, don't you ever touch me again. 2, don't you ever touch me again.
Then we've got my two favorite science dorks, Dr. Herman Gottlieb, played by Bern Gorman, and Dr. Newton Geisler, played by Charlie Day. So Bern Gorman you might know as Owen from Torchwood, or a lot of villains in a lot of TV shows. While I will say I absolutely love his performance as Herman, and it's his role in the series that really made me fall in love with Bern as an actor, it is a damn shame that they didn't hire an actual disabled actor to play this character. It's not my place to weigh in on whether Herman is good or bad disability rep, and if people want to have that discussion in the comments, I'm happy to read it. Basically, I've got a lot of ground to cover, so I can't really dwell on this for too long, but I know this casting might be disappointing to some people. His character, Herman Gottlieb, is an extremely extra mathematician.
Numbers are as close as we get to the handwriting of God.
According to co-writer Travis Beacham, Herman is also Jewish, which, yes, 10 out of 10, thank you. Basically, he's socially awkward to the point of barely functioning when he isn't being extremely uptight. Charlie Day is probably best known for his role as Charlie on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but aside from his work in Pacific Rim, my favorite thing he's ever done is this. Also, his sense of humor can be unnecessarily edgy at times. In one interview for the first film, this is how he jokingly pitched the sequel.
Get rid of the handsome dudes, get rid of the Asian girl, come on, just the nerds.
But in the film, his character Newton Geisler is a quixotic biologist who is, in Herman's words,
A kaiju groupie.
his life's work is obsessing about the monsters that could kill them all, and he's tattooed them on his literal skin. You know, like normal people do. Also, Ron Perlman plays Hannibal Chow, who is absolutely buck wild.
Where is my goddamn shoe?
Now, this is a huge cast, so I'm not going to run down everybody, but I will shout out my favorite minor character, Tendo Choi, played by Clifton Collins Jr. Just look at that bagel-loving motherfucker. Clifton Collins Jr. was also on Westworld, where he played Lawrence. And he was this guy in the 2009 Star Trek, and he was in Capote with Philip Seymour Hoffman. This man's filmography is nuts. Also, Ellen McLean voiced all the Jaeger AIs, and you might know her as the voice of GLaDOS from Portal.
Look, we both said a lot of things that you're going to regret.
Apparently, Del Toro played Portal 2 co-op with his daughter and liked her voice, so he cast her in this. So now, what's the plot? Well, a rift opened in the Pacific Ocean, and monsters started climbing out of it, and so 21 countries got together to solve the problem, and their solution was giant robots. I'm going to give you a minute to let that sink in because I will be the first to admit it's very funny. I mean, first off, multiple countries actually working together to deal with a global crisis? And then the fact that their solution to giant monsters was so prohibitively expensive, like, not only do you have to pay to design and build these giant robots, which involves paying a lot of engineers and technicians, then you gotta pay and train the pilots, it probably costs a lot of money. These are things I think about. We also learn Jaegers are so big, it's too much for one human brain to pilot them, so they created drift technology. Two people who are drift compatible basically have to mind meld to pilot a Jaeger. And what makes you drift compatible? A strong bond. Many of the Jaeger pilots we meet are either married, related to each other, or friends, because those are strong bonds. In other words, a better title for this movie would have been Pacific Rim: Friendship is Magic, because these robots are powered by friendship. So with that, let's talk some cool behind the scenes stuff.
That kaiju made land 2 years ago.
I thought the kaiju on the left.
That kaiju.
Okay, so while a lot of the core concepts of Pacific Rim, including the concept of the two-pilot drift, begin with Travis Beacham, I think it's fair to say the success of a Pacific Rim piece comes down to execution. So we gotta talk about Guillermo del Toro, who has a co-writing credit on the film, by the way. So Guillermo del Toro Gomez was born in 1964 in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico, to Guadalupe Gomez and Federico del Toro Torres. By age 7, he taught himself English from reading Mad Magazine and Famous Monsters. His two main literary inspirations were Juan Rulfo, a Mexican author who is said to be important to the development of the magical realism style, and Ray Bradbury. His first feature was the 1993 drama Kronos, a playfully dark take on the vampire myth that is more in common with Nosferatu than Anne Rice. Del Toro remortgaged his house, took out a loan, and sold his van to pay for what was, at the time, one of the most expensive Mexican films ever made with a budget of $2 million. It only made about $600,000 at the American box office, but it did win an award at the Cannes Film Festival and introduced him to the likes of director James Cameron, and got him his second directorial gig, Mimic. According to Del Toro, he had two of the worst experiences of his life during that time period. One was the kidnapping of his father in Guadalajara in 1998. His father was held captive for 72 days, and James Cameron ended up giving Del Toro over $1 million to help pay the ransom. Afterwards, Del Toro moved his family to America for safety reasons. The other terrible experience was working with Harvey Weinstein and Miramax on the movie Mimic. He's quoted in an IndieWire article as saying, "I have got to tell you, two horrible things happened in the late 90s. My father was kidnapped and I worked with the Weinsteins. I know which one was worse, but the kidnapping made more sense. I knew what they wanted." Damn, Guillermo. After Mimic, he co-wrote the script and then directed The Devil's Backbone in 2001. The movie is set during the Spanish Civil War and follows a young boy named Carlos, who just arrived at an orphanage that has been attacked by Francisco Franco's troops. There's an unexploded bomb in the courtyard and a shithead named Jacinto. The movie is incredible, haunting, and heartbreaking. He then directed Blade 2 and wrote and directed the 2004 Hellboy. In 2006, he returned to the history surrounding the Spanish Civil War with everybody's favorite movie, Pan's Labyrinth, another tale of childhood set against the backdrop of tumultuous times. It's really good, and if you somehow missed it, you should go watch it. Then he directed Hellboy 2: The Golden Army in 2008, and would not direct another film for 5 years until Pacific Rim in 2013. It wasn't due to the lack of trying. He was heavily involved with the pre-production of the Hobbit films, and he was set to direct them, but he had to leave the project for reasons. He had been working on producing that H.P. Lovecraft adaptation of In the Mountains of Madness before Pacific Rim, but that too was eventually shelved. Del Toro has admitted quite publicly that the list of films he didn't get to make is longer than the list of films he has made. After Pacific Rim, he made Crimson Peak in 2015 and the Oscar-winning Shape of Water in 2017. He's got a film called Nightmare Alley coming out sometime this year, and a stop-motion Pinocchio movie in the works as well. Oh, and because I don't have another spot for this, I need you all to know that Guillermo del Toro apparently just hates horses and cows.
I never liked horses, but after this scene, I hate them. I hate them, they're nasty animals, and I hate cows. Cows are evil. Cows are absolutely evil, I tell you that. They look like inoffensive, they're perverted creatures, and so are horses. They are absolutely nasty motherfuckers.
If I were to describe Del Toro's style in a word, the word would be meticulous. If you watch one of his commentaries, it feels like sitting in a classroom with Del Toro as your professor. He goes on lengthy talks about color theory and frame composition. One of my favorite little details is in Pan's Labyrinth. Del Toro wanted it to be very clear who the real monster was in this film, so Captain Vidal is deliberately meant to be a mirror of one of the scarier creatures Ophelia meets, the Pale Man. There's actually a visual parallel between Captain Vidal and the Pale Man, with them both seated at the head of a table full of food in front of a fireplace. But the fireplace behind Vidal is square, and the Pale Man's fireplace is round, just to make it clear that this is the other side of the looking glass. And that level of thought can be seen in every frame of Del Toro's work. He is precise to the point of obsession. He returned half his salary for Hellboy and his entire salary for Pan's Labyrinth in order to pay for the creature effects that the studio thought were too expensive. The man is obsessively detailed about every element of every scene in a movie he's directing. The production design of his movies is always beautiful, whether it's the ethereal labyrinth of the faun in Pan's Labyrinth, or what Del Toro described as the goth tech aesthetic of Pacific Rim. And of course, his creature design is immaculate and fantastical. Del Toro is an admitted lover of the monstrous, and all of his films are dedicated to those that society would consider outcast, whether it's a vampire or a fishman. In one IndieWire interview, he said, "Monsters are the patron saints of otherness. When I was a child, I was raised Catholic, somewhere I didn't fit with the saints and holy men. I discovered the monsters. In Boris Karloff, I saw a beautiful, innocent creature in a state of grace, sacrificed by sins he did not commit. I saw a martyr in the Wolfman, who is the very moving essence of outsiderness, with which I identified fully. Those monsters did not pretend to be something else. They presented themselves in their essence. And in an immediate way, there's nothing more political than fantasy." He goes on to say, "I am not a horror filmmaker. I am attracted to the forms of beauty and the graveyard poetry of horror. My movies lie somewhere at the crossroads between horror and fairy tale. My movies are fables that have the beauty and aesthetics of a horror movie. Monsters worship imperfection." There is a lot of love for Del Toro's monsters in every one of his films, even in a movie like Pacific Rim, where the bulk of the runtime is spent punching them. Which brings us to some fun facts about the making of Pacific Rim. According to the commentary, Del Toro actually managed to bring this film in under budget, and the way he did that was by carefully crafting practical elements to ground a lot of the CG work. Little bits of real set and set dressing that allow the CGI surrounding them to feel more real. A lot of the sets for Tokyo or Hong Kong had practical effects for scenes of kaijus rampaging around, which is really cool. Just like cars being thrown and dumpsters being crushed, which allows the CGI monsters being created to have more tactile interaction with the set. I love this little bit in one of the featurettes where some designer is saying that the Jaeger design might make more practical sense if the two pilots were sort of placed vertically inside the robot instead of next to each other. And Guillermo responded,
You're gaining logic when you're losing drama. I think the fact that these guys are going to be able to see each other, you need that. You don't want intercom. I really literally want the representation of they're both in the head.
The way every inch of this movie was planned and thought over to tell this story is just really impressive.
Not just eye candy, but eye protein.
One of my personal favorite details is the fact that the con pod, the room inside each Jaeger where the pilots make the giant robots go, well, there were two practical con pod sets. One set, dubbed the Shake and Bake, was the one used by the actors most of the time. They wore these harnesses that were weighted so there could be real heft to their movements piloting a giant robot instead of trying to mime it. And a crew member would operate the set by remote control so the set would move and tilt in accordance with the actors' movements. The other con pod set, dubbed the Mighty Mo, was used more by the stunt actors and was capable of more violent movements and 45-degree tilts. All of the actors hated working in the con pod sets because it was physically exhausting.
So it was a real test of one's sanity and physical ability.
It's the most painful, exhausting, excruciating thing I've ever done in my life. But it does look cool.
But by all accounts, Rinko Kikuchi never complained once. Del Toro also didn't want this movie to be some kind of recruitment ad for the military, which I think is cool.
And I didn't want to make a militaristic movie. I wanted to make a humanistic movie.
He wanted this to be a story about a diverse group of people saving the world. In a way, although this movie depicts events on an apocalyptic scale, this is actually a deeply optimistic film.
I wanted this movie to not be about a country saving the world. I wanted it to be the world saving the world.
There's other cool facts, like when he spoke with Charlie Day about casting him in the film, he asked to have a ridiculous cameo on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and Charlie Day obliged him. He was cast as Pappy McPoyle, this, troll man? Charlie Day said somewhere that Guillermo brought in a glass eye for this, like, unprompted, which is amazing. When it comes to the monster design or Del Toro's influences from mecha anime and kaiju movies, I recommend FilmJoy's video on Pacific Rim since it goes into a bit more detail there. But what I find fascinating about Del Toro's work is that even on a film as objectively silly as Pacific Rim, this guy's got influences from Francisco Goya's painting The Colossus to Mexican wrestling to the Chernobog scene from Fantasia. Del Toro said this movie came at a crucial time in his life and saved it. The making of the movie has been a transformative experience, the very best filmmaking process I've ever gone through. He spent 5 years trying unsuccessfully to get a movie made, and so when he finally got that opportunity again, it created this infectious glee that permeates every frame of the film. It's unironic, joyful, childlike glee. He described it as a movie from the youngest, freshest part of his heart.
What you see is an exercise in faith and an exercise in love. And I deliver myself completely to every movie I do without a single shred of irony. And I wanted my cast to feel that way.
And with that, let's talk about the actual movie. Pacific Rim is delightfully earnest from start to finish, and I must recap it so this video doesn't just become a list of scenes that make me feel things. Also, this movie came out like 8 years ago, and maybe some people could use a refresher. So it starts with an earnest prologue explaining the situation with the kaiju emerging from a rift in the Pacific Ocean called the Breach. The countries banding together and
we created monsters of our own.
And after all of that, this movie introduces us to Raleigh Beckett and his brother Yancey. They're established pilots in the Jaeger program, and, you know...
Hey, come on! We're being deployed.
They're sweet. They're about to go out on another run-of-the-mill mission to go punch a kaiju in their Mark III Jaeger, Lady Danger, and it goes extremely poorly for them. First, Lady Danger gets an arm ripped off, which is a thing the pilots get to feel because a sadist built these robots, apparently. Then, Raleigh's brother is ripped out of the Jaeger, while the two of them are still mentally connected, which means Raleigh gets to feel his brother die. Then Raleigh somehow solo pilots the robot to the shore, which is, as previously mentioned, mostly unheard of. And then he stumbles out of the Jaeger and collapses. And in things that make me sad, the novelization includes this line: "There was blood in Raleigh's eyes, and a hole the shape of his brother in his soul." Anyway, we're here for a fun monster movie, right? Are we having fun yet? From there, we jump ahead 5 years, and the Jaeger program is on its last legs, with the politicians of the Pan-Pacific Defense Corps pulling funding and putting it towards building a giant wall, which is quickly shown to be ineffective. So things aren't going great. Then the marshal of the Hong Kong Shatterdome, Stacker Pentecost, tracks down Raleigh, who is currently working on a construction team building said ineffective wall in Alaska. Pentecost asks him to come back and pilot a Jaeger, the last of the Mark IIIs, and Raleigh initially turns him down because...
I can't have anyone else in my head again.
And Pentecost brings up the salient point that the world might be ending soon, so, you know.
Where would you rather die? Here? Or in a Jaeger?
So the pair go to the Hong Kong Shatterdome, where we meet Mako Mori. And this clip is very cute, by the way.
Hey,
these two kind of instantly hit it off, but she's not on the list of potential co-pilots, even though there are serious vibes. We're also introduced to a bunch of other characters, like the Wei triplets who pilot the Jaeger Crimson Typhoon, the Kaidanovskis who pilot Cherno Alpha, and probably have my favorite Jaeger suit design, by the way. And we have Hercules Hansen and his son Chuck. They're Australian and pilot the Jaeger called Striker Eureka. Also, Chuck is a bit of an angry little shit, so him and Raleigh have some, tension.
Here's the thing, Raleigh.
Raleigh also learns that once he has his co-pilot, he's going to be piloting Lady Danger again. And Mako was the one who oversaw her fixes and upgrades. There's this great scene where the pair talk about Raleigh's potential co-pilot candidates, and Mako admits that she very much wants to be a Jaeger pilot and has some impressive stats in simulation tests. So Raleigh asks why she isn't one of the candidates for the co-pilot trials, and
the Marshal has his reasons.
Well, with 51 kills, I can't imagine what they could be.
I just love that they've known each other for like 10 minutes, and Raleigh is already like, Team Mako! Mako Mori's #1 fan! It's just delightful. Mako also says that his piloting style is unpredictable and dangerous, and Raleigh says that out in the field,
you make decisions. You have to live with the consequences.
And, I'm sad again. In the middle of all of that, we also get to spend more time with my two favorite science idiots, who I cannot stress enough bicker like an old married couple.
Herman, these are human beings. Why don't you say hello?
I've asked you not to refer to me by my first name around others. I haven't talked to you.
10 years, Dr.
10 years of experience!
I love Herman and Newt. I think they're ridiculous, and they bring me joy. Also, I must tell you, although this isn't anywhere in the movie itself, according to the Blu-ray special feature Drift Space, Herman and Newt actually wrote to each other for 4 years, from 2013 to 2017, after the kaiju attacks began. This correspondence was passionate and fascinating. Then the pair met in person in 2017 and instantly hated each other. Their working relationship is described as tempestuous. They come into the movie to provide comedic relief and basically info dump a bunch of stuff about how they're hoping to blow up the breach, and Herman's calculations that the kaiju are coming faster and there should be a double event in a week. Meanwhile, Newton thinks they should try drifting with a kaiju brain to get more information, and everybody is like, no, don't do that.
You'll kill yourself!
Or I'd be a rock star.
Meanwhile, Raleigh basically goes through a series of candidate tryouts to try and find a new drift-compatible co-pilot. It involves the form of staff fighting martial arts and more or less amounts to Raleigh fighting a bunch of dudes. And it's just not clicking. So Raleigh, Mako Mori's #1 fan and cheerleader, asks if he can try out with her. Pentecost says no, but like,
What's the matter, Marshall? Don't think your brightest can cut it in the ring with me?
I mean, really.
But I'm not gonna dial down my moves.
Then neither will I.
And Del Toro in the commentary called this scene a courtship. He even compared it to a waltz. It's these two finally having this moment of connection, a spark, a compatibility, wouldn't you say? It's great, and also gives me major bi panic. So afterwards, Raleigh is like, she's my co-pilot, right? Right? Stacker says maybe, and there's another great scene with Mako and Raleigh where Raleigh doesn't really understand the relationship between Mako and Pentecost, so he's just going on about how you don't have to blindly obey him, and Mako says,
It's not obedience, Mr. Beckett. It's respect.
In the meantime, Newt constructs a drift interface out of garbage and drifts with that kaiju brain, and Herman finds him having a seizure on the floor, and in the things that will make me bitter until the day I die, it would seem this scene went on a little longer because this shot exists in the behind the scenes, and I would like more of that, please. But while that's going on, it's time for Raleigh's first drift with his new co-pilot. Stacker comes to Mako and presents her a child's red shoe and tells her he made her a promise once. So Mako's going to be Raleigh's co-pilot. And that first drift goes, badly. Although Raleigh admits that he's the one who fucked up first, getting briefly stuck in a memory of his brother's death, Mako gets really stuck in a flashback of the day her parents died. So here's a bit of color theory stuff. Del Toro had a whole thing about how Mako's color in the film is blue and Raleigh's is yellow. So Mako has the blue in her hair, her introduction scene is all in blue, and blue's the sad color. But she's carrying a red shoe. Red symbolizes love and passion and life. And there's a little more detail in some of the special features, but basically minutes before we meet little Mako, her parents were violently ripped away from her and she's left carrying this little red shoe. It's like her heart was just ripped out of her body and she's just carrying it in her hands.
It was very important for me, the symbol of the little girl with her broken heart in her hand.
For the rest of the movie, red will come to symbolize passion, purpose, and drive. The whole end of the movie is bathed in red, and, we'll get to that. But in this scene, we just see baby Mako scared and alone, running from a giant monster with her heart in her hands, and Raleigh's there trying to snap her out of the memory because in real life she's almost activating Lady Danger's weapons that could, do some real damage in here. Eventually, everyone manages to cut power to the Jaeger, and Raleigh's first instinct is to make sure Mako is okay because, you know, we've got some platonic soulmate energy at this point. It's very good. And meanwhile, the K-Science team is having a time and a half. After finding Newton in that state, Herman gets Pentecost, and Newt tries to the best of his ability to explain what he learned.
Because you know what? Why do you care for the guy?
You! Shut up!
You! Keep talking.
We learn the kaiju are a hive mind, and that the ones they've been fighting are just clones built to clear out humanity to make way for the precursors, who are the real concern here. Also, Newton really is just a big hot mess. Drifting solo with a piece of kaiju brain was not really good for his brain, and Stacker is like, cool, would love more info, can you do it again? So Newt gets sent on a solo mission to get a new kaiju brain from resident criminal and seller of kaiju parts, Hannibal Chow.
Stacker Pentecost sent me!
As previously stated, this character is wild, but hang on to that, because on the other half of the plot, Mako and Raleigh get in a fight with Chuck after the drift goes bad. Chuck's all like, you suck and you're gonna get us all killed, so Mako defends Raleigh, and Raleigh is like, no, don't waste your breath, until Chuck says,
one of you bitches needs a leash.
And after one insult to Mako, this boy decides it's time to get into a fist fight.
Apologize to her.
Herc and Pentecost break up the fight pretty quickly, but there's a deleted scene here that makes me sad where Herc and Chuck get in a fight because, well,
I don't even recognize you, mate. Who are you?
Who am I?
these two don't exactly have a great relationship.
What more do you want me to be?
A bitter person!
And it's actually really sad as we realize from Chuck's perspective, his dad was pretty absent for most of his life after his mom died.
The only reason you and I even speak anymore, old man, is because we're drift compatible.
And apparently these two don't have much of a relationship at all, and that'll be sad later. But Raleigh and Mako get a talking to from Pentecost, and the big headline here is that Mako's #1 fan stresses to Pentecost that he was the one who messed up their drift, but Pentecost still benches Mako. Raleigh tries to change his mind because through the drift he saw that whole memory we only saw a piece of. Raleigh saw that Pentecost was the one who saved Mako as a child. He now shares Mako's memories and understands that Pentecost raised her and was like a father to her. And he has this very good and salient point.
You are holding her back.
Afterwards, Raleigh and Mako have this really sweet scene where they both kind of talk about like, hey, we kind of shared each other's trauma today. Mako got to experience Raleigh losing his brother and Yancey's death, and Raleigh experienced Mako's heartbreak and terror at the loss of her family. They talk about how the drift works when there's trust, and
Today the drift was strong.
so when two kaiju named Otachi and Leatherback show up, Striker Eureka, Cherno Alpha, and Crimson Typhoon all get sent out to the fight while Lady Danger and her pilot stay on the bench. And then that fight goes really badly. Cherno Alpha and Crimson Typhoon get decimated. The Way triplets and the Kaidanovskis all die, and Striker Eureka is immobilized with some kind of electromagnetic pulse. Herc breaks his arm, and also this happens.
Now we have a choice here. We either sit and wait or we take these flare guns and do something really stupid.
Which is a very funny line, and they go shooting flares at the kaiju until Lady Danger shows up in the nick of time to save the day. We get an extended, very fun and silly fight scene where they use a boat as a bat and shipping containers like brass knuckles or something. It's a good time. Meanwhile, Newton was trying to bargain with Hannibal Chow to get a kaiju brain or secondary brain or whatever, and eventually he reveals he drifted with a kaiju brain already, and apparently Hannibal Chow tried it one time and knows it's a terrible idea and that the kaiju are looking for Newt. So when the alarms go off, he's like, get out. Newt ends up in a public shelter, which Otachi rips into, and yeah, it turns out they were looking for him. That's probably bad. It's fine, Lady Danger gets there in time to beat Otachi's ass. There's a fun bit where they go on a little fly in the sky, and we learn Lady Danger has a sword now. Good shit. So Newt goes back to Hannibal Chow looking like a mess and saying,
You owe me a kaiju brain.
And at the Shatterdome, Mako and Raleigh are the heroes of the day. Even Chuck seems to have forgiven them now, which is nice. And Stacker actually says something encouraging for once. And then, just for Mako, we get this little line.
Proud of you.
Which is super sweet, but there's no time to rest because the day hasn't been saved yet.
Reset that clock!
I really like that bit. Also, Stacker keeps getting these nosebleeds, and it turns out he's dying. The early Jaegers were built in kind of a hurry and didn't have enough radiation shielding. Also, he piloted one solo for a while, and the novelization goes into a bit more detail, but he's not doing well. But we've got no time to dwell on that because 2 new kaiju have appeared and Herc can't pilot Stryker with a broken arm. Meanwhile, there's a whole really silly sequence with Newt and Hannibal Chow trying to get the brain out of Otachi. Turns out Otachi was pregnant, and the half-formed baby Otachi literally rips out of the stomach of Mama Otachi and goes rampaging around and eats Hannibal Chow! Bye-bye, Ron Perlman, I guess. But the baby has a brain that Newt can drift with, and Herman gets sent out to help him, and we get one of my favorite scenes in the movie. So Newt explains he's busy and gonna drift again, and the two bicker a bunch until Herman finally just says, fuck it, I guess I'm going to do this with you.
That's what the Jaeger pilots do. Share the neural load.
But honestly, this bit where Newton says,
You would do that for me! Or you would do that with me!
And it's so awkward and sincere as Herman fucking short circuits and suddenly doesn't understand how to do a handshake or a high five or God knows what.
By Jove, we are going to own this thing for sure!
Fucking fantastic. So, at the Shatterdome, the plan is for Pentecost to pilot Stryker Eureka with Chuck because he's so much of a badass he can drift with anybody. Only Mako, Raleigh, and maybe Herc understand that this might be a suicide mission. And we get another really sweet father-daughter moment here.
I'm so lucky to have seen you grow. But if I'm going to do this, I need you to protect me.
Then Stacker gives the cool speech.
Today we are canceling the apocalypse!
And as he heads out with Chuck, Herc tries to, say goodbye to his son.
You don't need an animal. I always have.
And he tells Stacker,
It's my son you got there. My son.
Anyway, I'm sad. So the plan is they're going to throw a nuke in the breach. But Herman and Newt realize, thanks to that second drift, that, the bomb needs to go down with a kaiju, otherwise the breach will just shut it out. So we get another long monster robot fight, underwater this time. A third kaiju shows up, which Herman had predicted, by the way, and
God, I was right.
poor boy did not want to be right today, oh man. Anyway, this fight is really long, and at some point we realize Stacker and Chuck aren't gonna make it.
We can clear a path for the lady!
So, Chuck and Stacker die, and hey, I'm sad again.
You can always find me in the drift!
Lady Danger is also really messed up from the fight, Mako's not getting enough oxygen or something, so basically as Lady Danger bear hugs this last kaiju to death and rides her down the breach, Raleigh jettisons Mako in an escape pod.
All I have to do is fall. Anyone can fall.
I know I didn't mention this earlier, but Lady Danger runs on nuclear power and can be a makeshift explosive, so they're just gonna blow her up in the breach. This takes a while, and Raleigh's gotta do it manually, and he's running out of oxygen, and it's a whole thing. Eventually, he does manage to set Lady Danger's self-destruct and get into the last escape pod, and, From here, we get this final scene of Mako waking up in her escape pod, alone in the ocean and looking for Raleigh. Initially, it looks like he might not have made it, and Mako hugs him and cries, and then...
You're squeezing me too tight.
So they hug it out, and it's great. Back at the Shatterdome, everybody celebrates not dying.
The breach is sealed. Stop the clock!
Newt and Herman get this really cute moment, and Hercules Hansen makes me really sad. The movie ends on this gorgeous shot, and that's the film. Also, if you sit through some of the credits, Del Toro fully admits that they just couldn't bear to kill off Hannibal Chow because they liked him too much, so in a mid-credit scene, he cuts his way out of baby Otachi's stomach and yells,
Where is my goddamn shoe?
And we will never get an answer to that. So let's talk about what happened between Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim Uprising. So, a lot happened between the release of the first Pacific Rim in 2013 and the sequel Uprising in 2018. First, we have to talk box office numbers. The first movie cost around $190 million, and while it did make back more than twice the budget globally with a box office gross of $411 million, only about $100 million was made domestically in America. It also performed well in China, making $111 million there, but even though it made back twice its budget in total, Legendary Pictures was not particularly pleased with the returns. But Del Toro was not in the least bit deterred. In July of 2013, when the movie was just released, he spoke with MTV and talked about his ideas for a sequel where we would see a new iteration of Lady Danger and Kaiju Jaeger hybrids. Also, Charlie Day said in an interview in August of 2013 that there were plans for Newton to turn evil in the sequel, but he also said maybe Del Toro had changed his mind, so just, have that knowledge. In June of 2014, Del Toro announced he was working hard on developing a sequel, which he was co-writing with screenwriters Zach Penn and Travis Beacham. And Legendary announced on social media that it would be released April 7th, 2017. He also spoke about an animated series based in the Pacific Rim universe that he was developing. He was looking for writers, talking to animation studios, the works. He said it was going to be about new, mostly younger characters, and it was going to be some sort of link between the events of the first film and his planned sequel. By October of 2014, he was talking about hopes for a third film as well. We were getting a lot of news, and Del Toro had a lot of big plans. We also got a poster for that planned sequel around then. In November of 2014, he said in an interview while promoting FX's The Strain that the sequel would take place a few years after the first, in a world free from kaiju, and he said, "It's quite a different movie from the first one in that I think that two of our main characters, like in the first one, are Byrne and Charlie. They are really, honestly, they are probably the guys I have the most fun writing, along with Hannibal Chow. So just from a purely selfish drive, I like writing them. I love writing for Charlie and Byrne. You're gonna get a lot of that. But the kaijus are very different, and you're going to see a very different type of robots, I think. It's going to be quite a different adventure." And he previously stated he had plans for Raleigh and Mako as well. Also, at some point this movie got the title Maelstrom. I can't seem to source when we got that information. I can only tell you when it changed, but we're not there yet. Because in 2015, the problem started. First, there's this Entertainment Weekly interview with Charlie Hunnam in June of 2015 when he expressed some disappointment with the first film being so technical and effects heavy. That rigidity is partially what led to his disappointment with Pacific Rim, which in the end favored the robots and their fights with monsters over the Jaeger pilots inside their heads. I think world creation and monster creation and all of that stuff is exciting as a secondary element of storytelling. When it becomes more important than storytelling, I get very nervous, and you sort of lose me a little bit, Hunnam said. Although we tried very hard on Pacific Rim to marry those two elements, I do feel like ultimately it got weighed heavier on the side of spectacle than storytelling. I will say, Hunnam clearly didn't have, major hard feelings. He was in Del Toro's 2017 film Crimson Peak, but this might be a contributing factor to stuff. But the real trouble came in September of 2015 when rumors began to circulate that Pacific Rim 2 was halted indefinitely. Although Del Toro was adamant in an Entertainment Weekly interview, "We are still turning in a screenplay and a budget in 3 weeks. As far as I'm concerned, it's not gone. We're still on it." He said the delay was only temporary, but he might do another movie in the middle. In October, he was tweeting about wanting to cast Maisie Williams in the sequel and posting concept art. Now, here's where it gets a little unclear. Stephen S. DeKnight, who is probably best known as the creator and showrunner for the Starz series Spartacus and the showrunner for the first season of the Netflix Daredevil series, was brought in to work on Pacific Rim 2 by Legendary Pictures, I think. It sounds like he met with the head of Legendary before he spoke with Del Toro, but he did speak with Del Toro and get his blessing on the project. The part that's unclear is how much of Del Toro, Beacham, and Penn's work was even seen by DeKnight and his team. It sounds like he brought his own pitch and ideas to Del Toro and Legendary. He really liked the idea of where I wanted to take it. He had a couple fantastic suggestions. Beacham does get a screenwriting credit, but it's based on characters created by Travis Beacham. So I would guess that the points where the two concepts cross over is mostly coincidence. What Guillermo said in 2017 on the subject in an interview with Collider was, "The timing started to suck. I had this little movie that I wanted to do, Shape of Water, very, very much. At one point it was Justice League Dark or Pacific Rim. I said, let's go to Pacific Rim. The reality is they said, we're gonna need to postpone, because they were changing hands. Legendary was going to be sold to China, to a Chinese corporation called the Wanda Group. They said, we've gotta wait 9 months, and I said, I'm not waiting 9 months, I'm shooting a movie, and I went and shot The Shape of Water, and we chose Steven DeKnight. He went on to say, it was such a great choice. I mean, I love DeKnight, love what he does. I think he's really brilliant, he said. He's making it his own. I'm not breathing over his shoulder saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? He's doing things differently, and I like that. When I produce, I try to produce the way I would like to be produced. I say to everyone I produce, if you need me, I will be there 100% all the time. If you don't need me, I'm not there. You show me the cut, then we'll start interacting. So, by all accounts, he made his peace with the franchise moving in a different direction. He gave his blessing and a few suggestions and went on his merry way. So, in 2016, we started getting the casting news. John Boyega was cast as Stacker Pentecost's son, and also came on to produce the film, which allowed him more creative control. Which, honestly, good for him. Boyega is such an incredible actor. He's got such presence in every film, and he's always delivering 100%. His character would eventually be so shafted in the Star Wars franchise, I genuinely think it's great that he used his financial success to create better career opportunities. But unfortunately, Charlie Hunnam was busy filming Papillon and wouldn't return for the sequel. Again, it's possible he just wasn't that interested in being in another big-budget sci-fi thing, but that is speculation on my part. Now, the movie did bring back Rinko Kikuchi along with Charlie Day and Bern Gorman and added new cast members like Scott Eastwood, Adria Arjona, Jing Tian, and Kaylee Spaney. But it's clear the script changed quite a lot in this period of time, and the title changed from Maelstrom to Uprising. At one point, there were scheduling concerns with Charlie Day, and it sounds like they were coming up with some buck-wild ideas to try and make that work, although DeKnight was adamant about wanting Newton Herman in the sequel. Basically, with the change in director, the change-ups in casting, and so on, Uprising had a lot of rewrites. DeKnight is one of 4 credited writers on the screenplay, along with Emily Carmichael, Kira Snyder, and T.S. Nowlin. And before we can delve further into all of that, I gotta talk about some fanfiction. Look, listen. Okay, listen. I wasn't going to make a video about Pacific Rim for a really long time. I was just going to reference it constantly and annoy my friends and family while I never move on from a stupid robot monster franchise. But I referenced it enough times in videos that people recognized me for the kaiju groupie I am and asked for this video, and that means you have to listen to me talk about fanfiction. I'm sorry, this is where we are now. Please go with me on this. It is inextricably tied to my experience of this franchise. Okay, so for some background. Designations Congruent with Things was a 253,887-word fanfiction written by an author under the username Clean White Room. And I am going to be using they-them pronouns for Clean White Room, colloquially known as CWR, because in retrospect, I don't recall a clear statement that the author was a woman, but I will refer to their cohort elementals as she/her, since I'm pretty sure that's how she referred to herself. This might be wrong, but I'm doing my best. Most of their stuff is now deleted and only mildly accessible through Internet Archive, so I tried. But anyways, Designations Congruent with Things had its first chapter published on Archive of Our Own in August of 2013, with the final 28th chapter being published in April of 2014. This was not Clean White Room's first magnum opus. They had another lengthy 70-plus chapter fanfic called Force Over Distance based on Stargate Universe. I did read it. It was pretty wild. It touched on similar themes of struggles with identity and personhood and science. It focused on the romantic and extremely troubled relationship between Colonel Everett Young and Dr. Nicholas Rush from Stargate Universe. They had other works related to Force Over Distance, like the Stargate fanfic Mathematique, which was never finished, and other assorted one-shots. Designations was kind of its own thing, though, and, well, there was nothing quite like it. This 253,887 word fanfic was dense in a way that at times verged on either postmodern or unreadable depending on your mileage, with paragraphs that could run over a page long. It's been backed up in various places online, and it's probably not something I can freely recommend for reasons I'll get into, but it did 100% influence me as a writer and definitely taught me a lot of words I didn't know before. There was a lot of Googling involved when reading this fic because I am not an academic and I don't know words like lambent, vasovagal, asymptote, chiral, eigenstates, catenaries, teleology, apexegesis, recondite, idiolect, perspicacious, ischemia, heterochthonous, philippic, onanistic, or epistaxis, just to name a few. Here is an actual piece of dialogue delivered by Newton Geisler in this fanfiction. So the drift, I'm pretty sure, is an empirical rejection of perspectivism. It's an epistemological absolute of the subjective experience consisting of the other and the look in an infinite loop where information transfer approaches whatever its maximum is while time approaches zero. So yeah, suck it, solipsism. And you have to trust me, that was pretty standard. It was 28 chapters of two dudes with massive vocabularies who are very bad at communicating, dealing with psychological trauma, their as yet unsaid feelings for one another, and a lot of disassociation, hallucinations, panic attacks, and some instances of what might be considered self-harm and other altered mental states. Also, I need you to understand that at several points, Newton asks Herman to be his life partner because he's worried about becoming a mad scientist of the Spider-Man variety without Herman in his life. Just like, log that knowledge away for later. While CWR was by all accounts a fairly big name in fandom at the time, with quite a lot of people obsessed over their work, it gets weirder when we remember they basically had a PR person. Yes, I'm serious. Elementals labeled herself a fandom assistant and was often the person one contacted if, for instance, you had feedback on the fic or wanted to post a piece of fan art to Clean White Room's website. I know that sounds weird, but it was 2014 and we didn't question it. At one point, Elementals was pestering other popular fanfic authors in the Pacific Rim fandom on CWR's behalf for reasons. A lot of this has been chronicled at length by Tumblr user Iris Bluefic. I have the link to their post in the description, but basically when some people tried to bring up some critiques with designations in the comment section on AO3, it was often Elementals who would respond. And there were reasonable critiques to be had because, as previously mentioned, there were some very intense descriptions of altered mental states. In Chapter 17, the opening author's note says, "I'd like to warn for psychological tough times. In my opinion, there's nothing worse in this chapter than in the rest of the fic." Chapter 17 features Newton on day 4 of an insomnia bout, hallucinating with voices in his head, disassociating, having panic attacks, and a very intense conversation with Herman where Herman accidentally kind of mentally goes kaiju for a second. I don't know how to describe it, but I think psychological tough times might be underselling this. I'm saying there were problems, and if you're unfamiliar with fanfiction, it's generally considered good form to at least try to be clear and specific if you need to put content warnings on specific chapters. Or if somebody goes, "Hey, I think you should put content warnings for this thing," you go, "Okay," and add those content warnings. It's very easy to do. From what I can gather, there are people who found this fanfiction genuinely traumatizing to read for all the previously stated reasons, and when said reasonable criticisms were brought up, it sounds like the responses from CWR or Elementals ranged from weird and unhelpful at best to outright rude and dismissive at worst. Again, I'm mostly going off secondary accounts since these comment sections are now erased from the internet. So, while the atmosphere was by no means a utopia, the fans of Designations trucked along, creating stunning amounts of fan works for it, including a literal band based on the band Newton Geisler had in the fanfic. It was called the Superconducting Super Colliders, and in real life, the band was a collaboration between CWR, who wrote lyrics, Elementals did some sound mixing, and Allison Stock, along with Tumblr user friend King Music, wrote melodies and performed the songs. They created like 4 albums worth of work, and it's genuinely good stuff. The song that's playing, I'm going to butcher this, I'm so sorry, En Règle and Out is a particular favorite. Elementals also recorded all the fanfics in audiobook form, otherwise known as a podfic, and I believe she was the one who collated a lot of people's fan works onto a single website for all of Clean White Room's stuff. In December of 2014, they created a prequel radio play called The Blue Guitar, which made me cry about Caitlin Lycap, a minor character in the Pacific Rim mythos. And then, around November of 2015, Clean White Room and Elementals deleted everything. All the fanfiction, the entire website with all the fan works, gone. Several of the artists who had closely collaborated with them were left in the lurch with no explanation. In retrospect, it's such a strange chapter in fandom history, and yet I still enjoy reading Designations. I still enjoy a lot of the beautiful fan art people created, and I still like the Superconducting Super Colliders music. And to be clear, this was just the corner of the internet I was in. There were loads of other fanfictions and other artists and fans who were creating beautiful art with minimal drama. I read loads of other wonderful fanfictions like Blue Stars from Out of the Ocean Risen series, and most of my experiences in the fandom were positive. I just find this to be a curious chapter with a particularly salient detail that I will bring up in a bit. And that was going to be the end of this chapter, but then the strangest thing happened! While I was editing this video and just screen capping some websites so y'all had something to look at while I talked about this, I discovered Clean White Room's 2021 finale for Designations Congruent with Things, Aftermath. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that either. As far as I can tell, these websites are still a work in progress. I have no idea if they intend to fully revive their internet presence or just put this up on their website and let the world find it organically. But I read the follow-up, and I liked it. It has a lot of the same stylistic tendencies as Designations, although now CWR has discovered the miracle that is paragraph breaks. I'm not a fan of how everybody seems to kind of worship Newt as some kind of miracle torture genius. Also, Newt has lung problems now, which is new, and one of his main grad students is named Jake, which does seem like a very purposeful fuck you to Uprising that gave me pause. I don't really know what else to say about it. If you liked Designations, go read it, and if you hated Designations or anything about my description has put you off, then don't read it. But that happened, and I had to tell you that happened because it's wild. So, with all of that said, let's talk about Pacific Rim Uprising. As I go into discussing the sequel, let me make a few things clear. I actually like this movie. I've willingly rewatched it, but I think it has some pacing problems, some tone problems, and one major story decision that I just think was really bad. But at the same time, how can I say this in a way so that it'll be taken in the spirit it was intended? If Jupiter Ascending is a queer camp masterpiece, then Pacific Rim Uprising is the gayest straight film I've ever seen. I will now make my case with the following bullet points. Jake in a bathrobe making an ice cream sundae in the middle of the night. This line.
You remember our old move? Hell yeah.
This line from the deleted scenes.
I stayed, you left, remember?
It's not that simple.
Lee Wen-Xiao wearing a power suit. This scene.
Bigger is better.
The fact that Nate automatically knows Jake's looking for ice cream in the middle of the night.
Ice cream's up top.
Yes.
This scene.
I'd hug you if I didn't have a rule about public displays of affection.
It's fine.
Okay,
all right. If you're done groping me, let's take care of the drones, right? All right, good.
Charlie Day's entire press tour for this movie, where he took every available opportunity to tell people that Newt and Herman are in love.
Herman and Newt, they're such a hoot. They don't like each other, but they love each other.
And he misses the man that he's in love with.
They have a real love for each other.
Our intense sexual chemistry.
It's unbridled.
And they have sex, by the way.
Lee Wen-Xiao covered in grease piloting Scrapper. All the times Jake called Nate pretty, handsome, and sexy.
It was between your pretty face and prison. I chose your pretty face. Get on my Jaeger. I'm handsome and sexy. He is handsome, he is sexy.
And to my immense surprise, Stephen S. DeKnight's entire Twitter feed after the release of this movie, and also this bit in the behind-the-scenes featurette.
It is a love story. You two used to be really close, you've come apart, and now you're trying to figure out how to come back together.
Like, I don't know how to make this any clearer. This movie is extremely gay, and I love it. I can't make the argument that it's a perfect movie, but I can say it's a movie that I deeply enjoy. Also, this bouncy robot go boing boing, and I love her! So with all that in mind, let's get into it. Uprising begins in a way that I can only describe as a bit of a tone salad. We get flashbacks from the first film while John Boyega's character Jake Pentecost gives us a refresher on the whole war with the kaiju and we built giant robots, etc. And then we learn Jake is actually not in the Jaeger program anymore. He's living on the outskirts, making his way in the criminal underworld, and there's like weird product placement. It's
You have to hustle. Somebody else might eat your breakfast and your cookies and your damn hot sauce.
It's really wild. But the movie gets underway after a deal for old Jaeger parts goes sideways and Jake meets the young Amara Namani, played by Kaylee Spaney.
How old are you?
Enough to kick your ass.
And he meets Scrapper, the robot she built from junk, who, I cannot emphasize this enough, makes me very happy in every scene she's in. Scrapper is the best robot. I love the way they pilot her. Just a big fan of this bouncy gal. We get a very fun scene of Jake and Amara trying to evade the authorities and Scrapper.
Hang on!
I'm hanging on!
Hang tighter!
Seriously?
And by the way, Scrapper can be solo piloted because she's very small, and the whole scene is fun and, dare I say it, scrappy. But the pair eventually get caught and thrown in jail, and John Boyega was given several opportunities to improvise a little bit, like this argument with Amara, and I think he's really funny here.
Why your top lip and your bottom lip, they need to meet and become friends.
We also learn that Amara built Scrapper because she believes the kaiju are going to come back, and, well...
When they do, I'm not going to be stuck waiting for someone else to come save my ass.
Not like before.
And then Jake gets a call from his adopted big sister, Mako. And I will pause and state here, yes, the conceit that Stacker had an entire son we never heard about is silly. Like, this scene...
You're gonna always find me in the drift!
It's very funny in retrospect because, like, not a word about his son? Not one? You have to roll with this. It's Tuesday. Don't worry about it. But I actually really like Mako and Jake's dynamic.
This is serious.
Okay, that's why I need my big sis to help me get the hell out of here.
Basically, Jake is hoping she can get him out of trouble, which I guess she's been doing for some time, and she says the only way out is to re-enlist in the Jaeger program to teach some new recruits, including the kid he just recruited, Amara. So they end up at the Moyulan Shatterdome in China, where we meet Jake's ex-boyfriend, Nate.
How you doing, Nate?
It's Ranger Lambert.
You're having a laugh.
And Amara learns that Jake is the son of Stacker Pentecost.
Did that haircut just call you Pentecost? Pilot of Coyote Tango, hero of basically the whole world?
It's just a name.
Yeah, really cool name.
Also, if Newton Geisler was a kaiju groupie in the first movie, Amara's apparently a Jaeger groupie.
Oh my god, that's Valor Omega.
That's Titan Redeemer. Embracer Phoenix. Saber Athena. I love Saber Athena.
It's cute. I like that she's kind of nerdy. So Amara gets put with the other Jaeger cadets in training. There's a few notable characters, like Ivana Sakno's Victoria Malakova, the Russian cadet known as Vic, who failed the entrance exam 3 times and doesn't like Amara.
Moyulan is for pilots.
Yo, what's her problem?
And Jinhai Ouyang, played by Wesley Wong, who welcomes Amara and offers to teach her some Russian.
I teach you some. Calms her down.
Fascinating. And I'm just going to say here, while I like the cadets, there's so many of them, and they're all wearing like blue, black, and gray clothing, mostly military looking stuff, or they all wear these green Jaeger pilot suits. In the first movie, they did a lot with the visuals to make sure their big cast was memorable, but here, everybody matches and we don't get enough time with them to even learn their names. Like, this is terrible, but if you go read the ridiculous fanfic I wrote to feel better about the end of this movie, I legit forgot that a bunch of them survived to the end of the movie. I just think the cadets needed more screen time, and maybe they could, like, not be wearing these matching uniforms. In a TV show, you could get away with this because there would be more time to get to know this big cast, but in a movie, you've got to be careful about how you use that limited real estate. I remember Vic, Jinhai, and Suresh. I had to look up all the other characters' names while writing this. And then we get a scene where Jake Pentecost is roaming around the kitchen late at night in a bathrobe, making an ice cream sundae and drinking a beer with Nate. They really do read like ex-boyfriends, and like neither of them are over it.
How many damn toppings do you need?
Leave my toppings be, man. Don't mess with my damn toppings.
But the big headline is Li Wenxiao from Xiao Industries is coming tomorrow to show off her new drone Jaegers, which could shut down the Jaeger program as they know it. Jake says that sounds cool because he doesn't want to be here anyway.
But you and I both know you could have been great.
So then we get to meet resident badass Lee Wen-chao. She's a businesswoman who's made it her life's work to build these drone Jaegers to reduce the loss of life in piloting Jaegers. She's also stern and arrogant and a great character. I love this running gag where Newton is bad at speaking Mandarin and she's just like, fuck you. She's intended to be a minor antagonist and I like her. So Lee Wen makes her pitch for the Jaeger drones, and it's down to Mako Mori to approve them because she's like a general now or something. Jake and Mako get this great scene where Jake is just reiterating that he doesn't really care about the fate of the Jaeger program, but he wants to be there to back up his big sister.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna go with you for moral support.
It's great, I'm a fan. Mako says he can co-pilot Lady Avenger with Nate, and Jake says this line.
He is handsome, he is sexy.
Also, we get this little scene with Herman and Newt where Herman is really excited to see his boyfriend, but it's clear they're estranged. Newt is weird and distant with him, but he does invite Herman over for dinner to meet Alice. Herman says he still has nightmares from what they saw when they drifted with that kaiju, and Newt is just like, yeah, but...
It was a hell of a rush, wasn't it?
So everybody goes to this PPDC Council event in Sydney, Australia, and this rogue Jaeger just strolls out of the ocean and causes absolute havoc, and Mako Mori dies because she just happened to be in a helicopter at a bad time. So, let's talk about that. So I like Pacific Rim Uprising. It's a movie that I have fun watching, but there is one huge Mako Mori-sized problem with the movie, and that is her death. I cannot stress this enough, Mako Mori deserved better. When I wrote fanfiction after seeing this movie, I wrote an entire chapter of Mako Mori's ghost being like, I did not deserve this shit, because she doesn't. On Twitter, Stephen DeKnight had this to say. No matter what the gender, race, sexual orientation, etc., killing a main character must be approached with careful consideration. In regards to Mako, the concept of how her story unfolds was purely my suggestion. I own that completely. To me, at the end of the day, all other concerns must be set aside in service of the story. For example, at one point, Mako wasn't even in the movie. Instead, Herc was the one in the helicopter playing the Mako role, and his fate was exactly the same. Now, that's not to say I'm happy with the way everything turned out. The original concept was much more involved and emotional. There were more scenes with Mako, and much, much more was made of her death. For example, there was a piece on the catwalk with Jake where Mako explains what happened to Raleigh and why she couldn't pilot anymore. That's the reason you don't see her in a Jaeger, but this was cut out of the movie, so it's not clear. Now, there's a lot to unpack here because it does sound like there were better choices for handling Mako that were lost, like talking about Raleigh and why she doesn't pilot a Jaeger anymore, but those scenes were cut. Those scenes shouldn't have been cut, but okay, there was once some more justification for the way Mako was portrayed in the film. In the commentary, DeKnight said that in an early version of the script, Mako was just in a coma and Jake was going to drift with her while she was comatose to learn the next thing they needed to learn, which, I mean, I don't love that either, but okay. The point that I think DeKnight missed really hard on is he says the fate of the character was always going to be like this, regardless of her race, gender, etc. But the problem is that those things do in fact matter. They really, really matter. How many big budget mainstream Hollywood projects have a lead character who's a Japanese woman? It's Pacific Rim, and I hear there's Kamiko in The Boys. I haven't watched The Boys, but I've heard about her from friends. And like maybe Katana in Suicide Squad, although I think she only has lines in the extended cut. I mean, we could have had a Japanese woman be the lead in Ghost in the Shell instead of Scarlett Johansson, but you know, Hollywood likes making stupid choices. Mako Mori was beloved because she was a well-written, three-dimensional character whose story could stand on its own, separate from her male co-star. She was so beloved that people literally came up with a new Bechdel test variant called the Mako Mori test for her. Now, for some background, the Bechdel test was created as a joke by cartoonist Alison Bechdel with regards to the treatment of women in media. It was meant to be the lowest possible bar, not the end-all be-all of feminist critique. The rules are: A, the movie has to have at least 2 women in it, B, who talk to each other, C, about something other than a man. Again, a low bar, but one that many films don't pass. But there are also films that can be feminist and still not pass the Bechdel test, like Pacific Rim. There are other variants like the sexy lamp test or the Ayla test for indigenous representation, the list goes on. And one test that sprung up was the Mako Mori test. The rules are A, at least one female character, B, gets her own narrative arc, C, that is not about supporting a man's story. You see, there were a lot of people around the first Pacific Rim who said it failed as a feminist film because there was only one woman character. But East Asian women were quick to point out that Mako gets to be a Japanese woman whose character isn't based in stereotypes, and she is one of the main anchors of the film. The Amazing Spider-Xan on Tumblr said, "If Pacific Rim does nothing for you, there are plenty of other films that will generally do quite well for white women. But as an East Asian woman, someone like Mako, a well-written Japanese woman who is informed by her culture without being solely defined by it, without being a racial stereotype, and gets to carry the film and have character development, almost never comes along in mainstream Western media, and honestly, somebody like her will probably not appear again for a very long time." In a conversation with YouTuber Lady Genevieve, she said she hated how a Japanese woman was treated as disposable and how the relationship between Mako and Raleigh was a big part of what made the first film sing. She added, "I want to be the hero of the story that can be physically powerful and have a hot person look at me with giant hard eyes." Also, one of my best friends who is Japanese American would just like everybody to know that, and I quote, "Everything about Mako Mori's death sucks and is bad." You see, from a storytelling perspective, I get why Mako's death happens. It makes Jake vulnerable and gives us the next clue in their story, but that's just narrative utility and does nothing for Mako's character. Even the version where she's in a coma still treats her more like a plot point than a person. And, you know, if I were to put on my script doctor hat, maybe we could have had a version of this where Mako gets injured and it's touch and go for a minute, but in the end she just doesn't die. It gives us the vulnerability, but also she could still show up at the end of the movie and have more scenes. I mean, that's just my take, but I do think this choice is the weakest part of the entire film. I understand why any viewer was turned off of Uprising because of Mako's death. Now, there is the caveat that I accidentally got into a conversation with Steven DeKnight on Twitter, and he answered a few of my questions. If you're watching, thank you, sir, that was cool of you. But DeKnight said that his plan for Pacific Rim 3 always involved Mako Mori, and it wouldn't be as a ghost or a zombie. And she would have been speaking Japanese. Not sure what that hint means, since she generally spoke Japanese, but okay. So it's hard to judge a movie we may never get based on a few hints. What I will say is that it's very, very hard to kill off a character and then walk it back in a way that honors the character and doesn't feel cheap. They had to spend an entire Star Trek movie bringing Spock back. That and Gandalf the White are probably the two instances I can think of where that worked, but often it just feels like wasted emotional real estate on a cheap plot point that ends up not mattering. Maybe DeKnight's idea would have been great. I can't say I haven't seen it. But given everything, I still have some reservations, and I think killing off Mako was a bad move. So, the rest of Uprising is mostly pretty good if you can get past the fact that Mako deserved better. I really like John Boyega's performance in the scenes after Mako's death. I really like this line with Amara.
She was my sister. My family.
But there are still a few issues with pacing in this chunk of the movie, like the scene where Newt drifts with a kaiju brain he has in a jar in his home that he's named Alice, and I Want to Know What Love Is by Foreigner plays, and it's tonally the wildest thing you've ever seen.
You read my mind.
According to the commentary, this scene was actually suggested by Del Toro, and also they really debated keeping it in the movie. And I think they should have kept debating because I don't like this scene. It's really weird and one of two tonally bizarre moments that involves a really strange needle drop. But in this bit of the movie, there's also a sweet scene where Jake tries to give Amara some tips on drifting, and we end up seeing a flashback of how she lost her parents. I will say, I don't love the actual flashback part of the scene. It's a little too on the nose and far too similar to Mako's backstory, especially in how it's presented to us. Just like,
Amara, you need to let it go. But just listen to my voice. Mako, listen to me.
Yeah. But again, I like Jake and Amara's brother-sister dynamic, so this...
Are you okay?
is really sweet. After this, we find the MacGuffin that Mako was trying to send out as her helicopter crashed, which sends them to Siberia. I honestly think this section kind of drags, although it does show us that Jake and Nate are reestablishing their bond.
You remember our old move? Hell yeah.
They find the rogue Jaeger, and it has kaiju bits inside it. Then Amara convinces a few of the other cadets to go roaming around the Jaeger's innards, which goes badly. Jinai gets hurt, and she gets kicked out of the program. Again, this part of the movie just goes on for too long, but Amara and Jake get a really nice scene here.
Don't let what other people think of you define who you are. You won't like where that takes you.
Also, John Boyega got another opportunity to improvise, and he has me in stitches.
Seriously. His face is set up well. Beauty is a burden.
And once Amara reveals to Jake that the rogue Jaeger was made with parts from Shaw Industries, the movie picks up again. There's this nice scene of Amara saying goodbye to the other cadets, and there's this line.
The next Jaeger you build, make it a big one.
Let's go, lesbians! Let's go! Oh my god, lesbians! Let's go, lesbians! Let's go!
And then some of the Shaw Industry Jaeger drones show up at the Shadow Dome, and they mutate into these Jaeger kaiju hybrid things, and everything goes to shit. Everybody is just running around, shit's getting blown up, and all of my children are just out there in the middle of it. Meanwhile, Herman goes to Shaw Industries to talk to Newt because he assumes they can figure out what's going on together.
Help me stop her, Newton. Help me save the world like old times.
Sorry, technically, you were helping me last time?
Fine. Help me help you save the world.
And the 5 minutes of Herman and Newt shenanigans at Shaw Industries is just delightful. The elevator scene? Oh my god, I love these two idiots. Also, this happens.
Okay, alright.
It's adorable. I love them. Everything's going just great until Newt is hacking into the Jaeger drones, and then
I'm ending the world.
Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs! It was Newt all along! But yeah, all the Jaeger drones start opening rifts all over the Pacific, and it's like Bad News Bears. And Herman tries to reason with Newt.
You are a good man.
No, Herman.
And we start to see that it's not really Newt in control.
And maybe that's why he did it, Herman. I did it.
DeKnight said on Twitter that most of what we were watching throughout the film was the precursors controlling Newton, with only 1 or 2 moments where the real Newt peeked out. And this scene is just really heartbreaking as Herman tries to get through to Newton, and Newt says,
He is not strong enough!
I'm sorry, Herman. They're in my head.
Also, DeKnight said in the commentary that Charlie Day actually cried during this scene and they CG'd out his tears, and I'm going to be bitter about this until my dying day. He said it was for continuity, but I don't care! Just CG tears on his face in the other shots! Anyways, I'm sad forever, but Lee Wen comes and saves Herman. She also tries to shoot Newton, but Herman stops her, saying,
It isn't him! It's the precursors! They must have infected his mind when we drifted with the kaiju.
Shut up!
So Newt gets away, and I'm sad. But Lee Wen and Herman are working together, and they disable the drones. Also, I really like this turn from Lee Wen. She's shown to be extremely pragmatic and driven when it comes to her business, which made her a good red herring for the whole villain twist, but in actuality, this is just her life's work, and she cares a lot about it. I just think she's a really interesting, morally gray character. I know she doesn't get a lot to do, and I know some people are frustrated that Newt's villainy makes her look like a fool, but I don't know, I think it all adds up to a cool character. Lee Wen Chao should be running the Shadow Dome in Pacific Rim 3. Just saying. So they shut down the drones and all the rifts close, but whoops, 3 kaijus did get through. Unfortunately, the Shadow Dome has been pretty decimated, so they need to scrap together what they can into some functional Jaegers, so Jake asks Amara to help with the repairs.
I thought I was kicked out.
Kicking you back in. She's pretty good at turning junk into Jaegers. You good with that?
Hell yeah.
And also, he calls her Smalley, which is an adorable nickname. So we get a fun montage of them fixing up Jaegers. I'm not sure how much I love this effect, but we're having fun now. We even get a little bit of that good old Pacific Rim theme, and it's great. And since a lot of people got killed in that last attack, it's up to the cadets to pilot all these Jaegers. We also learn that all the kaiju are heading for Mount Fuji because, I don't know, something about interacting with rare earth elements makes big world-ending explosion. It doesn't really matter, and it's a little silly when you think that nobody noticed during all those previous kaiju attacks that everybody was apparently always going to Mount Fuji, but whatever, we are in deep Tuesday territory. So we've got our mission now. They're going to stop the kaiju before they reach Mount Fuji. Jake gives a great speech.
This is our time. This is our chance to make a difference.
And we're off to the races. Although we do, on the way there, get the other weirdest needle drop ever.
What the hell? Keeps me calm. What about me?
It's really weird and kind of a tonal break at this point in the movie when we're supposed to be getting really amped up. But from there, it's just time for the big monster robot fight. It's goofy and a pretty good time, although it is wild that this movie is just kind of about child soldiers and a couple of them die pretty violently on screen. That's wild. Precursor Newt comes out like a mad scientist conductor to further orchestrate the fight.
Get up from that, you pile of junk!
At one point, the three kaiju sort of mutate together into one mega kaiju, and Jake and Amara end up being the pair that pilots Lady Avenger to stop it because Nate's too injured. There is a buck wild bit where, Scrapper, my best girl, comes back to, solder a rocket onto Lady Avenger's big robot hand so they can just jet to Mount Fuji in time to stop the mega kaiju. It's ridiculous and incredible, and Lee Wen-chao is remote piloting Scrapper while covered in grease. I love this a lot. And in the midst of all this madness, we're Lady Avenger's gonna take a big fall on the mega kaiju and probably just explode on impact, but there's only one escape pod left in the robot, so Amara has to sort of free fall and trust Jake to catch her. Then the escape pod won't work, and they just kind of hug each other and go well, we had a good run.
Your dad would be proud.
Holy shit. I know everything around this scene is ridiculous, but I teared up at this bit. Then, my best girl, still piloted by Lee Wen, is able to cut them out of Lady Avenger and get far enough away so they don't explode, and it works! They live! The kaiju gets blown up enough that it dies. They do trick you for a second into thinking it's still kicking, but nah, it's dead. And then Amara and Jake, relieved to still be alive, just kind of goof around and throw snowballs, and that's the end of the movie.
Is this the part where you're gonna give me one of those big dumb speeches?
Did everyone think it was dumb, or is that just your opinion?
It was, just be honest, how many times did you practice that in front of me?
It was motivational.
Okay.
There's one final stinger scene to set up a third installment where Newt, fully under Precursor control, is villain monologuing in this dungeon, and Jake shows up to say,
Tell them next time, they won't need to worry about coming for us, because we're gonna come for them.
And yeah, that's the end. And I walked out of the theater after seeing this movie and immediately called my sister and screamed, Clean White Room was right! Because, without Herman as his life partner, Newt became an evil mad scientist and Okay, let's talk about Pacific Rim: The Black. I'm going to spend the least amount of time on the anime because, I'll be honest, it did nothing for me. If you love the anime and hated Uprising, I'm very sorry, maybe skip ahead 5 minutes. The most interesting element the anime introduces is that the Jaegers now have individual AIs and names and personalities. Loa, the AI of the main Jaeger, voiced by Erika Lindbeck, is the best character in the show.
Of course. Babysitting is not a programmable skill set.
The two actual main characters, Haley and Taylor, are pretty dull. The little boy they find intentionally has no personality because he's wrapped up in some end-season twists. I like May, played by Victoria Grace, who was Yara in The Last of Us Part 2, but honestly, this series was just so flawed in my opinion. So first I have to address the animation. Legendary Television hired Japanese studio Polygon Pictures to animate it, and okay, first off, I'm not a huge fan of this 2D, 3D style at baseline, but Dragon Prince is fine, and this style can be done well. but these shots where it looks like the character animation is at like 5 frames per second, while the digitally animated kaiju move at a fully smooth 24 frames, or the terrible liquid animation, this shot in particular sent me to hell. And let me be clear, I don't want to blame Polygon Pictures for the quality of the animation. Based on Legendary's consistently trying to cut costs when it comes to this franchise, I would be willing to bet they did not give the animation studio enough time, money, or both. And I say this because I looked up a few other projects the studio made and like, hey, these look pretty cool and not like total ass. In terms of the actual plot, we follow 2 teens, Haley and Taylor. Their parents were Jaeger pilots and they plopped this bus full of children in this little crop of wilderness they found, and then they left them there and never returned. Then one day, several years later, Haley finds some like hidden training facility for Jaeger pilots with a whole Jaeger, and she's pumped to turn it on, and it sets off a siren which attracts a kaiju that shows up and massacres all of their friends. And we get to see their dead bodies. Are we having fun yet? From there, the 2 teens take this Jaeger and like go to try and find their parents or something. They spend a lot of the season fighting this one kaiju. They meet May, who has a dark and tragic backstory, and this asshole named Shane. Also, they meet a boy in a tube. They call him Boy.
This is my brother.
Taylor.
And him?
Boy.
This is probably one of my favorite details in the entire series. One of my biggest issues with the series in its first season is that Pacific Rim is edgy now. Remember when Idris Elba yelled,
"Today we are canceling the apocalypse!"
Well, I guess that didn't work out because this series is set in the post-apocalypse. Gone is the relentless optimism of the world saving the world. Most characters are just out for their own ends. A lot of Season 1 revolves around Shane, who is just the worst, and all of his people, aside from May and this guy Joel, are also assholes. Pacific Rim and Uprising both at least managed to capture that this is a fun, silly concept. We're here to have fun. The Black did not get the memo. That dude Joel? He gets his head blown up by shithead Shane. Now, it's possible this show could find its footing, and it's been renewed for a 2nd season apparently. I don't want to disrespect the people who worked on the show, but I feel like it completely misses the spirit of what makes a Pacific Rim work. It reads like an attempt by Legendary Pictures to cheaply profit on the IP they happen to own. I do find it fascinating to look at these 3 pieces together because with every iteration, we've gotten further and further from that humanistic and not militaristic love letter to Japanese media by a Mexican director. I'll be the first to say Uprising isn't perfect. It's got some tone problems and the ending is a bit abrupt, and also Mako Mori deserved better. If I were to try and summarize the difference in Del Toro and DeKnight's styles, I would point to this shot.
小蕊，大楼一切安全。
没有相关证件，任何人不许入内。
Did you miss it? I'll roll it back.
小蕊，大楼一切安全。
没有相关证件，任何人不许入内。
So in the commentary, DeKnight points out that in that scene, the character Kang says the building is secure, and there are extras just walking in and out the front door of the building.
I was so intent on the foreground, I didn't notice the background. The building is perhaps a little less than secure.
Del Toro's obsession with every element of a scene wouldn't have left room for this kind of a gaffe. But it's a small thing that DeKnight noticed after the fact and found humor in. His style is a lot looser, focusing on big, goofy action set pieces more than like symbolism and scene composition. But I think there's enough interesting stuff going on in Uprising that I still have fun watching it. And I do think a Pacific Rim should be fun. I think that's a lot of where the anime missed, since I have a really hard time laughing at these teenagers having a little dance party because I'm still thinking about their friend who got his head blown up like an episode ago. I think any piece of Pacific Rim media should have a big, vibrant cast of characters, and did you notice I didn't mention Adria Arjona's character Jules Reyes once in my recap? That's because her entire personality is, she works at the PPDC, is hot, and keeps interacting in potentially romantic ways with Jake and Nate, but come on, we all know where the real romance is.
Well, that's confusing.
This is not in any way the fault of the actress. I really liked Adria Arjona as Anathema Device in Good Omens. The character is just very underwritten. I personally ship her with Lee Wen-chao because, like, why not? But there are still a lot of new characters in Uprising I liked. Jake, Amara, Vic, Jinhai, Li Wen, and even Nathan Lambert is interesting and makes an impact. I guess my biggest hot take on the differences between the first Pacific Rim and Uprising is people have a lot of opinions about Uprising having a lot of robot fights during the day, while other people think the first movie's robot fights were kind of muddled and hard to follow because they were largely at night and in the rain, but I think both films get a little samey in the look of their robot fights. The first Pacific Rim has a fight underwater, but the Jaegers move so laboriously, after a while I kind of forget this is underwater, and Uprising tries with this fight set in Siberia or whatever. I think if by some miracle we get a third movie, it would behoove the director to mix it up. Try more different locations. Try different times of day. Can you imagine a big Jaeger fight set against a beautiful sunrise? Just make the individual fights more visually distinctive. That's my hot take, I guess. But I still want to see DeKnight's Pacific Rim 3. He's made it quite clear he's got a concept for it. Although, Steven, if you're watching this video, please do not try to make this a crossover with Godzilla. There's already a lot going on in this potential sequel. Please throw that in the bin and focus on character stuff, please. I'm begging you. I don't know if there's a script, but DeKnight's got those Makomori plans and also said shit like this on Twitter. I don't care if it's perfect. I just want it. I know I'm a terrible queer at this point, but DeKnight's made it pretty clear he ships Newton Herman, and the studio will not let him depict that. They'll blame China, but that's just lazy. Nobody wants to rock the boat, and the studios are cowards. So just this once, queer code the shit out of it. I don't care. Just let Herman give Newt a little kiss on the forehead. That's not gay, right? Bring Mako back from the dead. It turns out she was fireproof the entire time. Fuck it. Bring back Charlie Hunnam so Raleigh and Mako can snuggle some more, and let Jake and Nate go on a date. A dinner date. Between colleagues. There's actually so much in the behind the scenes of Uprising that fascinates me. The amount actors were allowed to improvise, leading to some of my favorite scenes in the movie, the amount of time the young cast spent together building up backstories for their characters and genuinely bonding. Look at this clip of Kaylee Spaney giving a speech at the end of filming.
It's been magical for me, and I'll never forget it.
The studios might be full of shit, but there was genuine investment in trying to tell this story, and it seems like everybody was really here for it. But the reality is, at this stage, it's very unlikely we'll get that third film. Not impossible, but unlikely. Pacific Rim Uprising cost about $150 million to make, about $40 million less than the first film, and just like the first one, it made back roughly double its budget with a total of $290 million. And this one made about a third of its money in China. But despite what is ostensibly a financial success, this movie was labeled a box office failure. You see, in the minds of executives, any movie that isn't making billions of dollars is a financial failure because Hollywood executives only care about money. They do not care about art, they do not care about the fans. All the people who feel the need to pit Marvel and DC films against each other don't seem to understand that Marvel and DC are million-dollar corporations that don't give a shit about you. They give a shit about making money. Capitalism sucks, and it's also the reason we're going to be getting shitty live-action Disney remakes until the earth crumbles into dust. With Pacific Rim, I'm assuming Legendary didn't want to spend the money to produce a decent third film, so instead they just produced a cheaply made anime and tried to profit further off this property with very little investment on their part. And so, when greedy studios do their usual thing, as is so often the case, we turn to fandom. I know I told that whole weird story earlier, but that was just one little piece of something huge and sprawling. Fandom's weird. It's always been weird. It will always be weird. It's full of jaded 12-year-olds and painfully earnest 20-somethings and everything in between. But fandom is also full of so much creativity and imagination. I've met so many wonderful people through Pacific Rim. I spent time writing about it and drawing the characters and crocheting them even. Look, life is hard sometimes, and Pacific Rim got me through some tough times with its goofy earnestness and with its story of outcasts coming together to save the world. The world saving the world, as Guillermo once said. To fight monsters, they had to build monsters, and to move on from grief, they had to learn to trust. As apocalyptic and silly as this story looks on the outside, this is a story about persevering in the face of incredible odds. It's a story about hope. As Tennyson wrote in his poem Ulysses, "Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. At the end of the day, this is a story about people coming together in the face of impossible odds to work towards a better future. And, in the end, isn't that what we all want? So, if you want to do some world-saving-the-world type stuff, I have links in the description to a few environmental causes that could use some support. In less serious things, if you know me or are familiar with my poetry predilections, you'll know I've been obsessed with Ulysses in relation to Pacific Rim since 2013, so yeah. I have quoted it before, I will quote it again. Also, thank you to all the fan artists who gave me permission to use their art in this video. I have links to all of their info in the YouTube description, so please look them up. I think that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.